This is a picture I found halfway through class, one of the semesters I taught it. So this is why it ends up later in the course. I think it's a good description of, or illustration of how incentives can work. So you can't exactly tell because of lights. This is a house built in France over a creek. There's a town over here and a town over there. But there's literally, they built a bridge and then put the house on top of the bridge. And they did that because you had to pay taxes on the land in those two towns. So because they built over that creek, they don't have to pay taxes. This is an illustration of how people respond to incentives. They found this something that ended up being much lower cost by building on over a creek, over body water. So they do so. So we're going to move into chapter 4 in this next section. So we'll talk about economic efficiency, and then when the government gets involved in the market. So government price setting, and then the effect of taxes, how taxes affect economic equilibrium. Before we jump in, I want to give just an overview, summarize what we've talked about in the course so far. So what we're trying to talk about in microeconomics is understand consumer decision-making and firm decision-making. 101, you're talking about macro, so you're looking at like the entire economy. So things going on in the US economy, looking at like GDP, unemployment, these big headlines, statistics. In micro, we're trying to understand human decision-making, trying to understand firms, how they decide to price products, how entrepreneurs act, things like that. So first we built up from the bottom, trying to understand how humans make decisions. So we looked at things like incentives, how individuals respond to incentives. We looked at the lack of knowledge that exists in the world, that we have all these areas where the world could be better, but people can't figure out how to do it yet. And how this is an opportunity for entrepreneurs to come up with new ideas, implement them, and to make society better off. Then we started to build up the market. So we looked at both supply and demand. So the demand side of the market is all about consumers and the benefit they derive from products and the value that they place on products. And remember, we talked about subjective value, that individuals value goods and services differently because they have different wants and different needs. Because of that, we end up with a downward sloping demand curve, where different people value the good differently. Some value it highly, some value it not very much. On the other hand, we have the supply side of the market, which is firms. Supply curve can be thought of as the marginal cost curve. And the more, it slopes upwards. So the more a firm produces, the more expensive it is. Reason being that you have to hire more workers, you have to buy more resources, things like that. The cost is going to add up. And also because firms are in competition with each other. Remember, competition's everywhere, not just with consumers between each other and firms trying to sell to consumers, but also firms trying to buy resources. Firms that are offering a product that consumers highly value, they're going to get a higher price for that. So they're going to be willing to pay a higher price for those resources that they're going to use to create the product. So that helps signal the firms whether or not they should be producing these goods and buying these resources, is whether they can recoup enough from the cost of production to justify that and stay in business. Remember, the profit and loss mechanism is very important. It's what makes the free market actually good, is that you reward people, entrepreneurs, firms that do a good job, that provide value to consumers. You give them that signal they're doing a good job, and other firms a signal that, hey, this is what consumers want. And then they go and they have an incentive to offer those same goods and services, or similar goods and services, because people want to make money, they want to earn a profit. And we have loss. When firms are doing poorly, when they're not making enough money to recoup their costs, they end up suffering. And they keep that up, they'll go out of business. So it encourages them to try to meet consumer needs in a better way. So we eliminate the failed alternatives, we reward those that are good and encourage more production of the goods and services that actually meet consumer needs. So in this chapter, we're going to be talking about economic efficiency. That's the main sort of idea running through this chapter. So first we'll look at consumer surplus and producer surplus. So when the market is in equilibrium, this is the point we want to reach. The market, through what Adam Smith called the invisible hand, encourages this. And in equilibrium, we'll talk about later, the last good that's being purchased, consumers and producers value it equally. So in this case, say the equilibrium price is $42 for a good. The last consumer purchasing a good is paying $42, and they value that good at exactly $42. And the firm is selling at exactly $42 because that's what they value it at as well. And we'll see the implications of what this means. But both consumers and producers, for most of these goods, are making themselves better off. They're willing to sell at a lower price or buy at a higher price. So we'll explore what this means. And we'll look at the efficiency of competitive markets. Again, we're talking here about allocative efficiency, making sure all the goods and services that people actually want and desire are being produced and purchased. Once we explore this efficiency, we'll look at government intervention in the market, specifically things like price floors and price ceilings, but we'll also look at the black market as well. And then finally, we'll look at the economic effect of taxes. This is going to be important because we're going to use this in the next chapter as well. For those of you that are annoyed about me talking about how awesome markets are all the time, you'll really love next chapter because we'll talk about when markets fail and how they fail. But before we get there, I want to talk about how great it is. So in equilibrium, when there's a competitive market, so we're talking about a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers, remember that's an assumption when we're talking about equilibrium in these couple chapters. Later on, we'll talk about when there's not many buyers and sellers, but for now, a lot of buyers and sellers, we're assuming that there's a lot of competition going on. So what's going to happen is the price adjusts so that the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. In graphical form, the price is too high, it's going to be pushed down. The price is too low, it'll be pushed up, right to this point, where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. So every consumer is going to be willing and able to pay the market price. They can buy as much as they desire at that market price. And every firm is going to be able to sell as much as they want at that price. You're not going to have extra goods sitting on the shelves. You're not going to have people standing in line at the store trying to get there first so they can get the good before it runs out. This is the situation that we want to be in. Now remember, each individual values the good differently. Some consumers are going to be willing to pay more. So if you look at our demand curve, we can think of this as the marginal benefit to consumers. Each consumer, each one, you can think of them as a different consumer, they're going to have a different marginal benefit. So up here, it might be like $60 that they're willing to spend on this good or service because that's how much benefit they derive from it. Whereas someone down here might only be willing to spend $5 on it. Again, because they only get $5 worth of value from this good or service. Now, this is what we would expect in voluntary exchange because people value these goods differently and they're not forced to engage in these transactions. They end up making themselves better off by engaging in trade. So an example I use is Friday night Uber. Not a lot of late night Ubering on the weekends now, but back before COVID, this was a thing. You leave the bar at 2 a.m., say it's, a half hour walk back to your house. It's raining out, it's late, you're tired, you just want to go back, you're pretty drunk. Well, odds are you'll be willing to spend a lot more money than what the Uber actually costs. It only costs $15, but with the long walk home in the rain when you're drunk, you'd be willing to spend $30, $35. That's a basic idea that we're talking about with consumer surplus. There's that scene in Futurama where they're selling iPhones. Fry just says, "Shut up and take my money." Doesn't even care about the price, just shoves the money in the salesman's face. So even though there's a price, like a market price that's set for these goods, oftentimes consumers value it even more, or would be willing to pay even more for it. So for an example, anyone here had Disney Plus? Anyone here actually pay for Disney Plus themselves, or just, okay, a few people. I had Disney Plus, which means I have my friend's password for it. But for you, those of you who actually pay for it, or those who don't, how much would you be willing to pay for Disney Plus per month?
I'd say like $1.
$1? Not a big Disney fan? Not a big Star Wars fan?
No, there's nothing good on there. Or something I haven't seen before.
You look at me like I'm going to tell you you're wrong or something.
No, I thought
it's subjective value. I literally can't.
I'm waiting for it. I thought someone else would.
Anyone else?
I kind of want to watch WandaVision. I'd probably pay like $10 a month for it right now, just to watch that, and I'd probably.
And then cancel it when it's over.
Yeah.
Anyone else? How much does it cost now? It used to be $6.99. So I did a poll of like people that were current Disney Plus subscribers. They said, well, how would you be willing to pay more than $10 a month? 25% of them said, yes, I'd be willing to pay more than $10 a month because I love watching these Disney movies for the 100th time. This is right when Mandalorian was coming out, so maybe people were super stoked on Mandalorian, or thought they would be stoked about it. Well, I'm pretty sure everyone was happy about the Mandalorian. So something that was $7.99, they were willing to pay $10 or more. So those are people up here on the demand curve. They're getting a lot more value. They're getting $10 a month of value from Disney Plus, but they're only paying $7. So they're pretty happy. They're getting, in their mind, a good deal. And for consumers age 16 to 64, 69% of them indicated a willingness to pay something for the streaming service, even if it was $1 a month. There's still some value that they're getting from it. Now, some of them, again, like if you value $1, way down here on the demand curve, odds are you're not going to actually purchase it at a normal market price. But if for some reason it would drop, if they had some kind of weird sale, maybe you take advantage of it. So the example a textbook gives, sticking with Star Wars, is you walk in the store and you see a Blu-ray of The Force Awakens with no price tag. I know no one like buys this anymore, you just stream everything. But you see that, and you think to yourself, how much would I be willing to pay for it? Pick it up, maybe you really like Star Wars, you're like J.J. Abrams, so you're like, oh yeah, I'd pay like, $25 for it. Why would you when you can like stream it so much cheaper? But maybe you think that. Maybe you live up here with like the bad internet, so it's like a lot harder to stream things in like HD.
I think that movie should be like ridiculous for Star Wars. How do you have to pay me to watch that?
I didn't think it was that bad compared to the other two.
I'm talking compared to the other two, but I'm talking about the original 6.
Well, yeah.
That was fair.
The Rise of Skywalker I liked. I watched it in the theaters like the night it came out.
Yeah.
I was stoked. I knew it was gonna suck, but I was stoked for it. I know it makes no sense. I just like the going to see Star Wars in the movie theater. I enjoyed it, but I walked out and I was talking to my buddies about it. We're all bringing up these scenes, and like, at least one person doesn't remember like all these different scenes because it was just so jam-packed full of stuff. So I refuse to ever watch it again because I have this positive like memory of it, and I know if I watch it again, I'm gonna ruin that with all the problems of the movie. All right, so you walk up to the register with your Blu-ray of The Force Awakens. You find out it costs $25, and I forget the number I threw out. I think it was 25, right? That was the purpose of this. Okay, so you walk up, you're willing to pay $25. You find out it costs $25. You're like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what I valued it at. If you thought to yourself, I value it $30 or like $35, I love Star Wars so much, or I need to complete the collection, then you'd be happy. You'd be like, wow, I valued it this much, and I don't have to pay as much. I'm getting a good deal from this. This is the basic idea of consumer surplus. So it's the idea of the surplus benefit that people derive from engaging in market transactions. How much better off they make themselves versus how much they have to pay. So consumer surplus, the first side. Again, I like to start with the consumer stuff because A, that's the way the textbook does it, so it's that much easier for me. But B, because you guys are consumers in your daily lives. You don't have a lot of experience working, like running your own businesses, but you can intuitively understand the consumer side of the market, simply. So the consumer surplus, the difference between the highest price the consumer is willing to pay for a good or service and the actual price they're paying. And the producer surplus is the flip side. So the lowest price a firm is willing to accept and like the difference from the price they actually receive. Yeah, so let's walk through an example with a very simple market with just 4 people. They're interested in buying a cup of chai tea. Chai tea? It's chai, right? I'm not a tea drinker at all. I have no idea. I hate that they pick tea for this example. They always mess up that pronunciation. So if we look at these 4 people, we can create a demand schedule for them. So we have 4 consumers here, and the highest price they're willing to pay. The highest price they're willing to pay is the benefit that they derive from consuming this tea. So if the price is above $6, no one's going to be willing to pay the tea. Teresa values it at exactly $6. So even if it's more expensive than that, she's not willing to buy it. But if it's at $6 or below, she'll be more than happy to. Maybe she's in this class and she needs tea to stay awake at 8 a.m. Maybe she really likes to taste the tea. I don't know. Then we have Tom here that values it at $5, the highest he's willing to pay. Terry values it at $4, and Tim values it at $3. So they're, each step on this weird demand curve. So how much is the benefit that these potential consumers, people that might be purchasing tea, how much do they get from this market? We have their marginal benefit, how much they're going to be made better off by purchasing and consuming this tea. What we also need is the price. And if we compare the marginal benefit to the price, we can see who's going to purchase, how many total in the market are going to be purchased, and we can measure how much better off these consumers are making themselves. So if we have a low price, a lot of consumers are going to benefit, a lot of them are going to purchase, and people like Teresa that value it highly are going to have a much higher consumer surplus. The price is high, very few people are going to purchase these goods, in this case, the tea, and very few, if any, consumers are going to benefit, let alone get a consumer surplus. So if our price is $3.50 for a cup of tea, anyone who values the tea more than $3.50 is going to end up buying a cup. So let's say we draw a line right here, $3.50, that's our market price. Teresa values it at $6, so she's going to be willing to purchase it. Tom's next at $5. Tom will be willing to purchase it. And Terry, who values it at $4, will be willing to purchase it. Terry, the last one, Tim, I think, I forget. Doesn't matter. The last guy values it at $3. That's less than the price. He will not be willing to buy the tea. Now, Teresa, she's willing to pay $6. That tea is worth $6 to her. That's how much benefit she believes she gets from it. Since she only has to pay $3.50 for this cup of tea, she gets a net benefit of $6, total value she derives from it, minus the price she pays, $3.50. The difference is $2.50. So that's her consumer surplus. How much better off she's being made by engaging in this transaction. So if you look at it graphically, this area A, everything between her marginal benefit and the price she pays, that's Teresa's consumer surplus. And in this case, it's just one quantity, we're using 0 to 1, so it's 1 cup of tea. So 1 times 250, so the area is 250. But it's not just Teresa that gets a benefit. Tom and Terry also get a benefit in excess of what they're paying for. So Tom is willing to pay, what, $5 for it. He's only being charged $3.50. So he gets a consumer surplus of $1.50, that difference. And Terry gets a consumer surplus of 50 cents. We have the difference between $4 and $3.50. So we have these three areas are all the consumer surpluses in this, small four-person market. Everything between the demand curve, the marginal benefit, and between the price. So if we wanted to do compute the consumer surplus for this entire market for tea, we would add up these three areas. Again, the entire area between the demand curve and the price. Now let's say the price falls to $3. Teresa, Tom, and Terry are all still willing to purchase the tea. Now they're being made even better off. They're getting an extra 50 cents each of consumer surplus because it's now 50 cents cheaper. At this point, Tim values the tea at $3 and is being charged $3. He'll be what we're called indifferent between the two. He values them equally. So in most cases, he's going to end up purchasing the tea. In this case, the consumer surplus is still the same thing, so the difference between the demand curve and between the price, because it's just 50 cents more for each of them. And in this case, Tim, whether he purchases the tea or not, doesn't make a difference to consumer surplus because he values that tea at exactly the market price. I know, thrilling stuff, right? So if we want to put together a real market, here's a demand curve that looks more like a normal demand curve. Rather than being steps, it's a straight line because we have a much higher quantity of people in the market. So it's much more like a normal market. Consumer surplus, defined exactly like we did in this very small market. It's the difference between this demand curve and the price that's being sold. So all this entire area. Everyone's paying $2 in this example for tea, but some of them value it much more. Anyone who values it at more than $2 is getting some sort of surplus, because they're only being charged $2. So we have all these people being made better off by engaging in these market transactions. So having access to internet is beneficial for consumers. I can't believe they really typed that out on a slide. I think we all know internet's good, it's fun. But you can actually measure how much people value the internet, how much they enjoy it, by estimating the consumer surplus from the market. So if we want to do that, we would need to know the demand curve. Again, remember, we don't truly know what the demand curve is, but afterwards we can often estimate what the demand curve is and get some sort of a picture of what it is. We would also need, in this case, the price of broadband internet service. And we need to know the quantity that's actually bought and sold in the market. So a couple economists 2 years ago tried to estimate what the consumer surplus was for broadband internet access. Back in 2006, the average price of internet was $36 per month. And there were 47 million subscribers in the US that purchased internet access, or broadband internet access. So in order, they estimated what the consumer surplus was. So they took the equilibrium price for the market, the quantity that's being bought and sold in the market, estimated the demand curve for it, and then found the area between that demand curve and the price. So we can consumer surplus is equal to the area of this triangle. If you remember the area of the triangle from like geometry, it's 1/2 times the base times the height. So 1/2 times the base, 47 million times the height. So $73.89 is where the estimated demand curve crossed the y-axis. So you have $73.89 minus $36, the price. We worked that out. They calculated it was $890.4 million per month was the consumer surplus from internet access. In other words, that's a lot of money every month that consumers are being made better off because they're able to engage in these market transactions. Some of them valued internet access over $70 a month. Maybe they were hardcore gamers, maybe they needed the internet for work and they were working from home. They valued it a lot more highly. So they'd be willing to pay upwards of $70 every month for internet access. But they don't have to. The equilibrium price in this case is only $36. So again, they're being made much better off by engaging in this. Point I really want to drive home in this section. Now, we talked about elasticity last chapter. Real briefly, I'll touch on how elasticity affects consumer surplus. I don't want to get super in depth in this, just give you guys a general idea that based on the slope of supply and demand curves, we'll have more or less consumer surplus in a market. So we'll compare two products, Fight Milk and Wolf Cola, because I try to pack as many It's Always Sunny references into class, even though not a lot of people get it. So Fight Milk is a very small fan base, and let's say they're very sensitive to the price because there's a lot of other supplements out there. Wolf Cola has a very distinct taste, and in many markets, it's one of the few cola options available, like in the episode where they become the official cola of Boko Haram. So let's say in this case, they have a much less elastic demand. So here we have Fight Milk. Fight Milk has a much shallower slope. So we have a much more elastic demand. A small change in price is going to lead to a much larger change in the quantity demanded by consumers. Because they're sensitive to price, we don't have a lot of people that value it super highly above the equilibrium price. So we end up with a smaller consumer surplus here. For Wolf Cola, we don't have a lot of substitutes. We have inelastic demand. In this case, some people are willing to purchase Wolf Cola for a lot of money. If that's the case, if that's true, then we're going to have a very high consumer surplus. Some people here are willing to spend a lot of money on Wolf Cola. Because they're willing to spend so much money on it, they're way up here, and the price is way down here, they're getting a very high consumer surplus. So when people are not sensitive to price, maybe they consider it a need, maybe there's not a lot of substitutes out there, things like that, they're going to get a very high consumer surplus in this market. People are willing to spend a lot of money, but they're not being charged a lot of money. On the other hand, when people are sensitive to price, there's going to be a much smaller consumer surplus. They're not willing to spend a lot more money on it than what they're being charged. So we end up with a smaller consumer surplus. This slide basically just summarizes what I just said. All right, do you guys have any questions about consumer surplus so far? Okay. So let's move on to producer surplus. And we can think of this as pretty much the same way as we did consumer surplus, just on the producer side. So it's going to be the difference between the lowest price a firm is going to accept for a good or service and the price it actually receives for that good or service. The lowest price a firm is going to accept for a good or service is the marginal cost of production. If you produce this next good and it costs you $10 to make it, you're not going to want to sell it for less than $10. you're going to want to at least break even from it. So because of that, we have the difference between the supply curve and the price that's being sold at. So we'll walk through another example, very small market for Heavenly Tea that's producing this special type of tea. So here is their supply curve or their marginal cost curve, and it's the same thing for these firms. So to produce the first unit, that first cup of tea, only costs them $1.25. It's pretty cheap for them. But as they produce more, it's going to be more and more expensive. So the second cup costs them $1.50. The third, $1.75. And the fourth cup, $2.25. Remember, you have to hire more workers. You have to, I don't know, maybe get a second machine that's being used for tea. You have to bid, I don't know, you have to buy extra mugs for the tea that like coffee shops may want to use. It's going to be more expensive as you produce more and more. That's why we have this upward sloping supply curve. So let's say the market price is $2 for this tea. So the consumer surplus on the first unit is going to be the difference between the marginal cost, or between the price, $2, and the marginal cost, in this case, $1.25. So the difference, 75 cents, represented by area A, is going to be your producer surplus on this first cup. The same thing for the second and the third cup, the difference between the price and the marginal cost. So the second cup, marginal cost is $1.50. The difference between $2 and $1.50, 50 cents is your producer surplus. And 25 cents for the third unit. In the fourth unit, the marginal cost is $2.25. But the price that Heavenly Tea would receive for this final cup of tea is only $2. So they're not going to be willing to produce this last unit. So if we add up area A, area B, and area C, the entire difference between the price and the marginal cost or the supply curve, we end up with the producer surplus for Heavenly Tea. In this case, 75 plus 50 plus 25 cents, so $1.50, the total producer surplus. So we break this down into an entire market. Because again, we don't just have one producer selling like 2 or 3 units of a good, end up with a lot more. We end up with that typical smooth supply curve. And again, it's the difference between the price and between the supply curve. That entire area. Sometimes one mistake is thinking that this is the producer surplus. Seems to match the consumer surplus here, put producer surplus there, but it's not the case. Difference between the price and the marginal cost curve, or the supply curve. Okay, so what do consumer surplus and producer surplus actually measure? So consumer surplus is the net benefit to consumers from producing a market. It's not the total benefit. So the total benefit would be this demand curve all the way down to equilibrium. I'll take that all the way down to the bottom, the supply and demand curve. That's not taking into account the cost. When we're talking about the net benefit, we're taking into account the cost that's being paid. So it ends up being the difference between the total benefit received by consumers, or that demand curve, minus the total amount they have to pay, which is their price. Again, difference between the demand curve here and the price it's being sold at. And for producer surplus, it's the same thing. It's the net benefit received by producers from participating in this market. So it's going to be the price they receive for the good. Think of the price they receive for the good times the number of units being sold. If we ignore the supply curve, this square right here, that's like their total revenue. But remember, it's not just the total revenue in the business that matters. You have to take the cost into account. The cost into account that we're taking into account is going to be that supply curve. So the net benefit they're getting for producing in the market, participating in the market, producing these goods, is going to be the price minus the marginal cost. So what we see in markets is both consumers and producers are making themselves better off. They're deriving this extra value from participating in market transactions. So we can think about the efficiency market in two separate ways. We can think of marginal benefit and marginal cost, or we can think of it in terms of economic surplus. Both of these cases, both of these ways of thinking about it, are going to lead us to the same result. Basically that, equilibrium is good. So first, let's look at marginal benefit equals marginal cost. So the demand curve, remember, is a marginal benefit to consumers. The supply curve is a marginal cost for producers. Where these two curves cross, in this case, $2 price and 15,000 cups per day, the marginal benefit of that 15,000th unit is going to be $2. The marginal cost of that unit is also going to be $2. Every single consumer that wants to buy a cup of tea at $2 is going to be able to. And every firm that wants to sell a cup of tea at $2 is going to be able to. But let's say that firms don't realize this at the time. They don't know what the equilibrium price is going to be, what the equilibrium quantity is going to be. So they only bring 14,000 cups of tea to the market. They don't have enough tea on hand to satisfy the demand. What ends up happening? At 14,000 units, so we're to the left of equilibrium. Here, trace that up to the supply curve. The marginal cost there is only $1.80. So less than the equilibrium price. But the marginal benefit to consumers for that 14,000 cup is going to be $2.20. So the marginal benefit is going to be higher than the marginal cost. We have a bunch of consumers that can make themselves better off if they engage in this trade, and firms that would make themselves better off. Okay. There's just one slide for this. So what's going to happen? These consumers are going to be standing in line. There's going to be more people there than they have cups of tea to sell. Firms are going to realize they start pushing the price up in order to ration the good. In this case, we have ration the tea. And they realize that they can keep producing more and more units of tea. The marginal cost of production right now is $1.80. People are willing to pay $2.20. So they know they're going to be able to produce more at this, at that cost and sell it for a profit. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to slowly increase their production and steadily move all the way up until they reach the 15,000 units, until the marginal benefit equals the marginal cost. And the whole way along, the price they're charging will increase until they move up to the equilibrium price. Now, again, because they don't have a sheet of paper or a computer printout that has supply and demand curves for this market on there, they may go too far. Let's say the quantity they're producing is too high in this case. They blow right past 15,000 cups and end up producing 16,000 cups per day. If that's the case, at this point, the marginal cost for them, 16,000 units, is going to be $2.20, above the equilibrium price. The consumers are only willing to spend $1.80 on this last unit. The marginal benefit curve is below the marginal cost curve. So in this case, if you're the consumer that values tea at $1.80, and they're trying to charge you $2 or $2.20 for this cup of tea, you're not going to be willing to purchase it. It doesn't make you better off. It makes you worse off. firms end up producing too many units. They end up, normally I would say sitting on the shelf. I guess you don't like leave tea sitting on the shelf. But you end up with too much. You're not able to sell. They're going to have to slow down their production in the future, let the price fall down back to equilibrium. Hopefully, if they start at 14,000 and they produce up and go past equilibrium, they quickly realize that the cost of production is higher than the money they're getting back for it. Hopefully they wouldn't go this far. But maybe they just completely ignore what's going on, or they have a bad manager. The manager's sick that day, maybe. So it's only at the competitive equilibrium, at the price of $2 and the quantity in this market of 15,000 cups per day, where the last unit is valued by consumers and producers equally. So people will be happy to buy that last cup. Producers will be happy to sell that last cup. We can also think of equilibrium in terms of consumer and producer surplus. So here we have a market in equilibrium. Difference between the demand curve and the price of $2 here is our consumer surplus. The difference between the price and the marginal cost or supply is going to be our producer surplus. When we are at equilibrium, these two areas are maximized. So on our previous slide, the marginal benefit equals the marginal cost at equilibrium, promoting economic efficiency. Here at the competitive market equilibrium, the consumer and producer surplus are maximized. So it leads us to the same exact result, that markets are going to be pushed towards equilibrium. We're maximizing economic surplus, the consumer and producer surplus, and where the marginal benefit is equal in the marginal cost. So economic efficiency, this thing we get at equilibrium, is the market outcome where the marginal benefit to consumers of the last unit that's being produced is equal to the marginal cost of production, and where the sum of producer and consumer surplus is at its maximum. So economic efficiency is both of these things, marginal benefit and marginal cost, and consumer and producer surplus. They're both happening at the same time. This may not seem like much now or like it's important, but we're going to be talking through the next two chapters about economic efficiency. So the marginal benefit and marginal cost is kind of like what we were talking about in the previous chapters. Consumer and producer surplus is where we're going in the next couple chapters. So the point of this is to show you that the definition of economic efficiency is both what we've already learned and what we're moving on to next. So using the idea of producer and consumer surplus, we can see what happens when a market is not in equilibrium. So let's say in this example, the price of tea is $2.20 instead of $2. The equilibrium price right here, equilibrium quantity, still 15,000 cups per day. But in this market, they're selling cups of tea $2.20, so a higher price than equilibrium. If we look at the market in equilibrium, the consumer surplus, difference between the $2 price and the demand curve, areas A, B, and C. All of those are what consumers get in excess of what they're having to pay for these goods and services, or in this case, tea. The producer surplus is D and E, this area. So between the $2, the equilibrium price, and the supply curve. Now, if firms, again, through a mistake, and not knowing what equilibrium is yet, charge the price of $2.20, so a higher price than what would be efficient in the market. They're not going to sell as many cups of tea. At $2.20, only 14,000 consumers are willing to purchase a cup of tea. So we have these 1,000 transactions, the difference between equilibrium and what we're actually seeing. Those transactions are not taking place. So all this potential benefit that could have been realized to consumers and to producers aren't going to take place. So we have these areas C and E that's lost. And it could be, if the market was in equilibrium, it would be realized, but it's not because transactions aren't taking place. So now just A, B, and D are going to be our producer and consumer surplus. We split up between the two. Now, because the price, instead of being $2, is at $2.20, everything between the demand curve and that price is going to be the consumer surplus. So it's just going to be the area A, this little triangle. A lot smaller than when the market is in equilibrium. But the producer surplus is going to be higher. It's going to be the difference between the price, 220, and the supply curve. So it's area D, like before, and area B. Goes from being consumer surplus to producer surplus. Yeah, so we end up with producers losing this area E, these transactions that never take place, and gaining area B. We have consumers losing area B because of the higher price that they're paying per unit from these transactions that are taking place, and they're losing area C. Again, these transactions that are not taking place because of the higher price. So in this case, producers are making themselves, looking at the area, they're making themselves better off. Consumers are much worse off. There's a lot of transactions that aren't taking place. So the reduction in economic surplus resulting from the market being out of equilibrium, from too few units being sold and too many units being sold, is called deadweight loss. We can also think of deadweight loss as the amount of inefficiency in a market. In a competitive equilibrium, we're maximizing efficiency, so there's no deadweight loss. When we're outside of equilibrium, in this case, too few units being sold, we're not being efficient, so there is deadweight loss. Typically, markets aren't in equilibrium. The incentives created by the market constantly move it towards equilibrium. But supply and demand curves are shifting. Entrepreneurs make mistakes. Firms price too high, things like that, or too low. Produce too many sometimes, or not enough. So we end up with some amount of deadweight loss. And it's entrepreneurs or firms reacting to these changes, recognizing that there's some sort of inefficiency in the market, that their price is too high. They're getting this incentive to lower it. They're getting this incentive to increase production. That eliminates deadweight loss. Remember, I said we have these supply and demand curves, we draw them like real static, like they're not changing. But in the real world, they're constantly moving back and forth. Like when you go to order an Uber when it's really busy, or like a Friday night, or it's like after a concert, even if you're like commuting to work in the morning, if you pull up the price, you have one price, you can go back into it, like order it again, and you'll have a slightly different price, maybe higher or lower, depending on the time, because the number of drivers that are on the road are constantly changing, the people that are ordering are constantly changing. I used to be able to commute from my place in Arlington to like the center of DC. So probably like a 15, 20-minute drive. I could do an Uber pool for about $2.25 if I timed it right. But there was this very narrow, like 3-minute window I had to hit in the morning. Otherwise, it'd be like $6 or $8. Like, people that were going to work super early were like done. People that were going at like a normal time like weren't out yet. Days I missed it was like $6. That kind of sucked. Yeah, just showing how quick supply and demand curves can change in markets like that. So firms have to constantly respond to the price being too low or the price being too high, making too many or making too few, moving us back towards equilibrium. So do you guys have any questions about the efficiency of markets being in equilibrium, and our two definitions? Okay. About 15 15 minutes left, so we'll start off. There's not enough time to get through this section, but I guess we'll start it off. So far for economic efficiency, we've said society is the best off as possible, and we've maximized welfare at equilibrium. Economists also call it Pareto efficient, after the economist Pareto. Basically what he said is that at this equilibrium point, society is as well off as possible. We've maximized producer and consumer surplus. The only way to make it better, or not, the only way that individuals could improve their situation is by making somebody else worse off. And even when we're in equilibrium, some individuals can make themselves better off, but it's going to be at the expense of others. So it's going to create some inefficiency. We'll have some sort of deadweight loss. So imagine me robbing one of you guys. I don't know, I walk up, I take your laptop because I want it. I made myself a lot better off. But now you're worse off because you don't have a laptop. Think of the market in equilibrium before. Now I'm just moving us out of equilibrium. So we see this in markets, that sellers would prefer a higher price for the goods they sell. They would always love to charge more. And consumers would always love to pay less and do things to try to pay less. Now, through different laws or regulations from the government, people can actually go and lobby the government. Groups of people can escape equilibrium, make themselves better off, but reduce economic efficiency. We see this both for consumers and for producers, taking advantage of laws and regulations designed in such a way to make them better off at the expense of other parties in the market, at the expense of having this perfectly efficient equilibrium. So we're going to walk through a few examples. So we'll look at price floors and price ceilings. So one option that the government can do to move a market out of equilibrium, to affect markets, is to impose what they call price controls. So either a price floor, saying you cannot charge below this price, or price ceiling, that you cannot charge above this price. So price ceiling is legally determined the maximum price that sellers can charge. Anything above that price is illegal. And you get caught, you get fined, eventually you go to jail, they take your business license, things like that. And a price floor, legally determined, so with the backing of the government, minimum price that sellers can receive. Anything below that, again, is illegal, taking outside of the protection of the market. So in the United States, now this is pre-COVID, we're not going to go through any examples of price controls or things with COVID, but before that, price ceilings and floors in the USA were uncommon. Wasn't something we dealt with much. We pretty much let markets dictate what the prices are going to be. But we have some very prominent examples. So minimum wage. I try to stay away from politics as much as possible in this class. Normally it works, but unfortunately for me right now, in keeping politics out of class, minimum wage is in the news right now. This is a prominent example, price floor. There's also rent controls. So in some cities, they have maximum price that you can rent an apartment for. And finally, there's agriculture price controls. These are the three examples we'll look at in detail. Agricultural price controls are like the least sexy of these, the least politically popular, contentious. So the example I like to work with. I don't think I have enough time to go through price floors, so we'll end early today. I'm sure it's a travesty for you guys. Again, if you have any questions,